I'm glad you brought up Quilligan, right? So you have to say there's been some kind of mystifying decisions in Clare when you analyse the nuts and bolts of it. So if you go back to last year's All-Ireland semi-final, you know, probably Paddy Fitzpatrick, who had played very, very little that year, coming in for John Connon, that was probably maybe a strange move. Quilligan not starting, we'll say, this year's Munster Championship, and maybe mistakes from Eamon Foodie maybe costing the game. Maybe Tipperary wouldn't have a championship win this year had Quilligan been in goal.
Jesus, hold on now.
Don't
be looking for ways to take a pop on me.
There's a distinct possibility that could be true. There's leaving Cian Nolan on Galan as long as they did in the Munster final. And then there's going with Sweeper yesterday, which I just thought was very, very strange. And Brian Lohan talked about after that they were trying to contain Kilkenny. Like, and the thing I'd say about that is, like, are you telling me that Kilkenny are more dangerous than Limerick? So you've gone toe-to-toe with Limerick. You've not tried to contain them. You've gone man-on-man. And you've left a few open areas in defence, but you've gone for it, and you've really said, we're going to, you know, attack is the best form of defence. We're going to really, really take them on here. And you were left wide open a small bit, but they still could have won the game if they put the ball over the bar at the other end. But then they're playing Kilkenny, who, yes, Owen Cody is very dangerous. Yes, TJ is dangerous. And they play a sweeper who they hadn't really played all year. And I thought even Shane O'Morey being sweeper was interesting, because John Connon surely would have been the one who's fallen back, and he's generally fallen back and playing that role in games. Maybe it was because of, you know, the knock that he picked up against Dublin that he didn't play that role. But when you put, like, that's probably 3 to 4 really big tactical moves that have not gone right for Clare, you'd have to say. And you'd have to wonder whether, and I'm not having a go at anyone, you know, involved in the backroom team, but you'd have to wonder whether there might be another voice needed there, or there might be another face needed there, or there might need a little bit, maybe more kind of guidance. Even like Aaron Chandler come on so late yesterday, Clare chasing the game, he gets 3 minutes. You know, a guy who can cause wreck in that type of scenario when Clare really had their dander up. Just thought there was a few really, really strange moves, probably yesterday, and even when you analyse it, maybe over the last 12 months.
Yeah, I have to say, the decision-making on the line, it has been costly. And I was looking at the Shane O'Morey thing, and my read on it was they're going for pace, someone who can really cover the ground. And maybe even, like, remember Colm Galvin in 2018 when he was moved out to sweeper against Galway after 15 minutes. But he's a very different type of player to Shane O'Morey, he's just a very speedy, good hurler, very, very quick, and you can see him carrying the ball through the lines. You can imagine how that would work. And maybe they thought, we need to have like sort of a set of stabiliser wheels, because we're unsure of the spine of our defence in Conor Cleary and John Connon, if the two boys are right. We also kind of maybe feel that if Mossy Keown starts, maybe he's not right, and Conlon can get through the game, making sure he spoils him in the air. Because like last year, Paul Flanagan was and he's an excellent defender, was criticised for having a few balls caught over him. So maybe they thought, okay, we can't start Flanagan there because of that concern. Whether it's true or not, maybe that's the way they were thinking. Obviously, Cian Nolan had a tough time in the Munster final. They weren't going to start him. Who were the other options? Darragh Lohan was started against Dublin and probably had a tough time against Danny Sutcliffe. And after that, there aren't that many options that I can see that they have on the bench. And even Aidan McCarthy as an option to play him wing back, which would have maybe allowed David McInerney to go in the full back line, for example. So I think they had a limited amount of options. But I agree with you. I think John Conlon should have been the spare man, or failing that, Paul Flanagan should have been the spare man. He made his debut, was it the 2020 championship against Laois, playing that role. In his first game, they gave him that role.
Brilliant on the ball, really, really comfortable on the ball too.
And also knows where to be. So that was the thing that probably didn't work so well for Morey. He wasn't standing in a position that was cutting out like a full avenue for Kilkenny to deliver the ball, allowing the markers behind to mark on the other side. So you should be nearly positioning yourself as a sweeper to cut out the ball on the one side so the marker has a yard on the other side. And that's something that Limerick do well, that Galway had been doing well coming up to this. And I just think that sort of let them down. And you have to play a player there in a massive game, somebody who's familiar with the role. And I think Brian Lohan got that wrong. And it's not the first thing he's got wrong.
Just on this point, the Detox 101 makes a good point, Shane. Sweeper may have been there to protect two injured central players. You know, my question there is, you know, if you're playing an All-Ireland semi-final and you're that worried about two central players, should they both be playing? If that's why you're playing the sweeper there. And it looked like something that was totally unfamiliar to Clare even yesterday. And I was looking at the game and I was like, in the first half, I was thinking, like, Clare are never going to win this type of game. They're never going to, it was a real kind of an arm wrestler struggle. They're going to be, they weren't able to create a head of steam. They'd too many men behind the ball, not enough kind of runners. They were playing into Kilkenny's hands. They took the shackles off in the second half and they really went at Kilkenny and looked the better team for the vast majority of the second half. But, there's probably an energy deficit there when you're chasing the lead and you have to come back from 5 down or whatever. And they got hit with a bit of a sucker punch then when, in fairness to Billy Ryan, Eibhear Quilligan gave the sharp hook out to Rory Hayes. Rory Hayes gave it back to him. Quilligan passed out Billy Ryan, gave the ball back to Hayes, and Billy Ryan came back at him again and got the flick in. And, that was real cutthroat from Kilkenny. It was like, that was the game-winning chance, really. That was the time to go for the throat. And I talked about the ball coming off Duggan's hurl like a cannon. It came off Cody's hurl like a cannon as well. That was, an unbelievable finish. I think it was Hogan was very unlucky. It was actually very like your brother Paddy on Richie Hogan in the 11 final. Like, he was there. It just, his hurl was right where the ball was. It was just a tiny bit too fast. But Cody was so clinical yesterday. I think he had 7 shots at goal, scored 1-5. Do you know what I mean? You can't. One of them was a Hawkeye, I think, as well. And I've criticised him in the past for maybe missing chances, that are high percentage chances. He was clinical as anything yesterday. And, Owen Larkin talked on Thursday show about whether the captaincy was a burden on him. I think he's maybe placed more of an expectation on himself, and he delivered in spades yesterday.
Is there any angle of this we haven't covered?
I think most things are covered. We just mentioned about Hugh Lawler there. Amazing point he got in the first half for a fullback coming up off the left hand side. I thought David McInerney, who carried a knock into the game, had an outstanding second half, and I thought he used the ball well as well. He didn't drive aimless ball. Just think Clare will have a lot of regrets. Yes, a couple of decisions didn't go their way, but they shot themselves in the foot a tad as well. And it'll be a hard one to look back on. Lohan has 4 years done now. They've beaten in 2 Munster finals, beaten in 2 absolute epics, beaten in 2 All-Ireland semi-finals, beaten by 3 this year, hammered last year. I'd imagine
didn't play to their best in either.
Yeah, there's been some funny calls, I would say. To the best of my knowledge, he's another year when his contract was extended, so he'll go into a 5th year. But time is running out a small bit too. Do you know what I mean? And it will be, as Taggy mentioned there, with the Croke Park factor. They haven't won a game in Croke Park, a championship game in Croke Park, since the 2013 All-Ireland semi-final or All-Ireland final replay. And it hasn't been a particularly happy hunter ground, you'd have to say.
I don't think that there would be any mood within Clare to get rid of him. Obviously, some people are going to be frustrated, and empty vessels make the most noise is generally what you hear. Like, there's justified frustration in some of these decisions, but broadly speaking, it seems to be like big support for him in the county. So I can't imagine that there's a mood to get rid of him. Like, Colm Collins just finished up after 10 years with Clare, so I don't think it would bother the county board too much having one man in the position for a long period of time. But there is kind of a feeling that with Tony Kelly probably not too far from the age of 30, John Conlon probably 32 or 33, Shane O'Donnell's been on the road for 10 years. He's still absolutely class, but he must be late 20s at this stage. They probably do need to get something done here at this stage. Losing Ryan Taylor to injury in the first half, like, obviously they were better in the second half anyway, but how much better would he have been in the second half if they were playing, more players further up the field and they weren't adopting the sweeper and so on? Things went against them at the same time, and Aidan McCarthy wasn't available to play, but every team is carrying injuries.